Let me introduce you to a couple of the most important contributors to my quality of life: my stress levels, my mental health, my sense of connection, especially while living solo. This is Rusty. Say hi, Rusty. And this is Rudy. She's my problem child. I've heard tuxedo cats have quite the personality, and she lives up to that, don't you, baby? Yeah. We pet owners, we love to talk about our animals, but it's just more than that. Studies prove that their presence actually plays a much bigger role in our health and our well-being than most people realize, because the research shows us that our pets don't just make us feel better, especially when we live alone, but they can actually protect our mental health, our hearts, and even our brains. It's biology, it's psychology, and it's science. Hi, my name is Lisa. I am a proud Canadian mom, grandma, a retired teacher, and counselor. And on this channel, I talk about starting over in our 50s, retirement, and living solo. And today, we're going to talk about the 5 research-backed reasons as to why having a pet when you live solo can actually be a real game changer for your health and your well-being. So let's start with reason number 1. Having pets combats loneliness and social isolation. More people than ever are living alone, either by choice or by circumstance. And while living solo can actually be pretty deeply fulfilling, as I've talked about before on different videos, the research can also show that long-term social isolation can be a real health risk, even comparable to lifestyle factors like smoking. I've talked about social isolation on this channel before because it is such a huge factor in living solo, especially in retirement, because we don't have that job to go to every day to have that social connection. And I strongly feel that we need to get out there, to get involved in our communities and make those social connections in some way. But this is where pets can come in, because with pets, we have companionship, we have routine, we have a physical connection, and they can dramatically offset many of those health risks that are associated with living alone. So for example, they are 36% less likely to report feeling lonely compared to non-pet owners. That's more than a third in reduction of loneliness just from having an animal companion. And you know what? There's nothing quite like them meeting you at the door, whether you've been gone for 5 minutes or 5 hours. They're just so excited to see you again. And that just feels amazing. But not only are they there for us every day to, talk to and feed and walk and all those different things, but they also connect us to other human beings. So, for example, how many of you have met your neighbors specifically because of your dogs? Or you even know your neighbors because of your dogs? And then how many times when you take your dog out for walks, you meet people in the neighborhood or in that off-leash area, and you get to make those social connections because of the dogs getting to know each other as well. I think a perfect example of this is the way I've met other people in the condo has been through my pets. And let's face it, we all love to talk about our pets. So I find it hilarious that when we have different meetings for different clubs around the condo, it's the pet club meeting that has the largest attendance. It's actually the most fun meeting to be part of. And then when the meeting part is over, we still stick around and we talk about our pets, right? So it becomes that connection because we have that common bond. They become conversation starters with strangers. And in this condo, we actually look after each other's pets. Sometimes when people are sick or they're away, we'll walk each other's pets. Or when we're traveling, there's people in this building who will come into my condo and they'll look after my cats while I'm gone. So it just becomes a way of having those social connections. But pets are not just there to make us feel less lonely, they actually protect our brains. Reason number 2 is having pets protects cognitive health and slows mental decline. How is this possible? Well, it's because having pets engages our brains, reduces our stress hormones, prevents that isolation that we just finished talking about, has those daily routines that we need, and also restores purpose in our lives. When preparing for this video, I was looking at different studies, and there is one study that just made me go, oh, wow, that's so cool. So what they were doing is following 8,000 adults over the span of 10 years. What they were measuring was objective cognitive change over time. And what they found was very specific and so cool. So as it turned out, for people who lived alone, pet ownership was associated with significantly slower decline in verbal memory and verbal fluency, two of the earliest cognitive abilities to deteriorate with aging. And this is why this is so important, because living alone and being socially isolated is associated with a 50% increased risk of cognitive decline and dementia as we age. 50%. But having pets can help counteract that risk. And in fact, in this study, the pet ownership eliminated the usual association between living alone and the faster cognitive decline. What does that mean? Well, when people live alone, the chances of them having faster cognitive decline is risky, right? But when they have a pet, that risk disappeared. And what I found really interesting is that this effect did not show up as strongly in people already living with others, which tells us that this isn't just about liking animals. It's all about what pets uniquely provide when you live solo. And why? Because pets make our brains actively engaged. We talk to our pets. We anticipate their needs. We interpret their behavior, especially if they're acting weird in terms of, do they need to go to the vet? We have routines with them, and sometimes we need to adjust routines if things are, we're traveling or whatever. They're forcing us to think and problem solve and use novelty and language skills. Our pets reduce chronic stress, which actually protects our brains. And how is that? I've talked about cortisol before, and this is that stress hormone that creates that roll of fat around our bellies. And what cortisol can actually do as well is it becomes toxic to our hippocampus. Our hippocampus is the section of our brain that is responsible for formulating those memories. So it's important to keep our cortisol levels low for various reasons. And pets can help with this because they lower that cortisol level. They increase another hormone called oxytocin, which is like our safety, our bonding. It's our love hormone. They help us by stabilizing our whole nervous system. And when cortisol drops, our memory encoding improves. So neurons in our brains are less likely to shrink, and also our brain inflammation decreases. So the bottom line is less stress, slower brain aging. Our brains, they also like rhythm, they like routine, and pets give us those things. Things like feeding times, walking time, medication routines, the routines that the animals go through at night when they go to bed. Like my cats, for example, around 11 o'clock at night, they're at the door. It's time to go for a walk, and I take them up and down the hallway. And this last one is about purpose, and it's a little more subtle, but having purpose actually helps protect our brains. It is associated with a slower cognitive decline and a lower dementia risk. It gives us better executive functioning. That frontal cortex that has to problem solve and everything, it helps exercise that function. In other words, your pets, they give you someone to talk to, someone to think about, a reason to move, a reason to show up, and your brain benefits from all of it. And speaking about health benefits, let's talk about your heart. And I mean literally your heart. There is a reason why we bring dogs and puppies into places like yoga class or senior centers or hospitals. And you know what? Like at my old school, we even brought a bunch of dogs into the school just as exams were starting. And the kids could go into a classroom and just sit with the animals for, an hour before they walked into their exams. Why did we do this? Because the research shows that it is incredibly helpful in just bringing that blood pressure down. It brings your heart rate down, that cortisol level down, and it increases that oxytocin, right? That safety and love hormone. Because when you're all stressed out and like something has overwhelmed you and you can't think, it's because everything is going like crazy in your brain and it's basically hijacked your brain. So how are kids supposed to write exams when they're feeling that way? It's like they go blank, right? So having the animals there brings everything down. So then it's like it unlocks their brain, the blood can flow again, and they can think as they go into their exams. One of the studies that I found super interesting was they put somebody into a high stress situation, like they had to do some mental math or they had to do some public speaking. And so they were quite tense about it, anxious about it. So they completed their high stress task and then they sat either with a pet or a friend or a spouse, or just no one at all. They just sat in quiet. And of those three, guess who had the best recovery? Their blood pressure came down faster, their heart rates came down faster, and their stress recovery was faster. And if you said the pets, you'd be right. Bottom line was that strongest calming effect occurred when the pet was present. It was even stronger than when their spouse was present or their friend. I just thought that was amazing. And something else that's so cool is when you are stroking their backs or scratching their necks or behind their ears or sitting there listening to them purr, and they're nice and warm on your lap, you just feel your whole self relax. Because what's happening is your blood vessels are relaxing, allowing your blood pressure to drop, your heart rate is slowing, your oxytocin levels are increasing, and your cortisol levels are decreasing. And all of this just gives you that warm, fuzzy feeling. So you have two systems in your body. It's the sympathetic system, which gets all ready to fight or flight, and then your parasympathetic system, which just calms everything down. And when you're petting an animal, basically that's triggering your parasympathetic system to calm everything down. And what's crazy is that these shifts can happen within minutes. So imagine the benefits that we have of having those animals with us every single day. In fact, a 2022 study found that cat owners were 42% less likely to have high blood pressure than non-pet owners. And dog ownership is associated with a 31% reduction in cardiovascular death. That's nearly a third reduction in your risk of dying from heart-related diseases because you have a dog. It's been found that people with pets have significantly lower resting heart rates and blood pressure compared to non-pet owners. But here's what's also really interesting, is they also show smaller increases in heart rate and blood pressure when stressed. So they actually recover faster from stress as well. So pets literally make our cardiovascular system more resilient. And here's reason number 4. They increase our physical activity and make us have exercise. I want to start this one off with a story. This is Zoe. I had Zoe for 12 wonderful years. She was not a normal Bichon Shih Tzu, that's for sure. She loved snow and she loved to swim. She was crazy. She would just look up at me with those big eyes and just go, "Come on, let's go." And I'm thinking, oh man, I wouldn't do this for myself, but I would find myself putting on the scarves and the boots and everything and taking her out in a frickin' blizzard because she just couldn't stay home. She had to go for a walk, and I would do this for her. So let's be honest, when you live alone, it's easy to become a hermit. But you know what? A dog will get you outside and walking. You need to get out of the house, and they don't care what your excuses are. They don't care if you're sick. They don't care if it's raining or if it's snowing. They want to go for that walk. In fact, dog owners tend to walk more often throughout the week and for longer bouts of time throughout the week than non-dog owners. And with cats, it's a little different because not every cat likes to go for walks. But our condo just bought a pet stroller, like a double-decker pet stroller. So I am going to put them in there and see if it works out once the weather gets nicer. But for right now, 11 o'clock at night, they're up at the front door of my condo because what I'm doing is walking them up and down the hallways. And they're actually really liking that. And they get into that routine for sure. Let me know. It's time to go, Mom. Let's go. Let's go. And one study I found that was super fascinating. It was a 2023 study that said People who are 65 and older, having both a cat and a dog was associated with the lowest risk of cardiovascular disease. I found that fascinating because, like, the dogs definitely get you out, get you walking, and the cats are more of the cuddle bugs. And together, they just seem to be that perfect combination. But beyond these physical benefits that we've been talking about, there's something even more fundamental about having pets. And that's because reason number 5, they reduce stress, anxiety, and depression. Bottom line is they are good for our mental health. According to research, 69% of pet owners say that their pets help reduce their levels of stress and anxiety, and 66% say that their pets provide a calming presence. Those numbers are huge because having our pets not only helps us in the immediate, like we've talked about before, but over time. It's like a daily emotional buffering. They give us those purposes for getting out of bed and having those routines and showing up for them every day. They help with our mood regulation. You ever have just a really bad day and then you come home to your dog, go, I'm so happy to see you, right? Or even the cats, they get excited and they jump on my lap as the moment that I sit down. That means something. It impacts that emotional baseline when we live with a pet. They really can be a key factor in preserving our long-term emotional health. And let's address the stereotype of the childless cat lady. Well, first of all, I'm not childless. I have 2 boys and grandchildren. But you know what? I don't care if you are childless or have 6 kids. I don't care if you're female, male, doesn't matter. We're human. And as a human being, we benefit from having these pets in our lives. So if you want to call me a crazy cat lady, then go ahead, because my 2 little critters, they're giving me lower blood pressure, better cognitive function, superior cardiovascular health, and to them, I am the queen of the universe. So it's all good. So if you're living alone and you've been considering getting a pet, I hope this video has given you some evidence to take that next step. You're not just getting a companion, you're getting an investment in both your physical and your mental health. And if for some reason you cannot have a pet in your world, the research shows just by going to the shelters and working with pets can give you some of those benefits as well. And if you found this video helpful, please consider giving it some thumbs up and subscribe, because it really does help small channels like mine. And in the meantime, if you do happen to live solo and have some pets at home, give them extra treats today, because they are helping you physically and emotionally and mentally. So they deserve it. Have a great day.